well, yes, FI selling for the 8th consecutive session, but that amount looks slightly smaller. So at least that can be seen as something optimistic. But we also have Jahangir Aziz, the MD and head at Emerging Market Economics Research of JP Morgan. And he's here to talk about all the global moves that we've been seeing. And Jahangir, hi, morning. Lots of news flow coming in. Just a few minutes ago, we've heard that the US and Japan have signed a deal for their auto tariffs now lower at 15%. You also have Trump talking about how semiconductor chip tariffs could also come to reasonable levels. What is your first take on these comments, and how can this play out for major global economies? Because autos and semiconductors are something that affect all major global economies.
Yeah, so that's an important question, and the reason why it's important is not because that they're having these trade deals, is because you had a U.S. federal court judge ruling that the U.S. Court on International Trade's ruling that was about month and a half back, that IEEPA, which was a framework on which all of the reciprocal tariffs and the fentanyl tariffs have been based, and on which most of the trade deals have been done, is illegal. That case is now been sent, or we assume that it will be sent up to the Supreme Court. The date by which that is going to be heard by the Supreme Court is October 14th. We don't know whether the Supreme Court is actually going to hear the case or not hear the case, or the Supreme Court hears the case but pushes back judgment by another 3-6 months. But much of this, all of these trade deals, etc., hinge on this, that if IEEPA is ruled ultimately to be illegal, and therefore the government, US government, has to go back to more traditional ways of dealing with tariffs, then you're down to essentially 3 options. But the more permanent options, there's the temporary options of Section 122, but the more permanent options is to use Sections 301 and Section 232. I know I'm throwing out these numbers to you. Section 301 was the basis on which all the China tariffs of Trump 1.0 were based, but it's very, very cumbersome and it's very, very resource intensive to impose them. Much easier is Section 232, which are the sectoral tariffs. So if all of these reciprocal tariffs are deemed to be illegal, and that again rests with the Supreme Court, we don't know when it's going to happen, what the chances are, but suppose they are, then the US government most likely will fall back on Section 232, which are sectoral tariffs. And if the US government wants to have an effective tariff rate, which is close to what they have right now, which is RS estimates around 16-17%, then these sectoral tariffs must be actually increased, and the number of sectors have to be expanded to include semiconductors, including pharmaceuticals and other sectors. There isn't a way in which you can get rid of the reciprocal tariffs and the fentanyl tariffs and then say, I'm only going to rely on the sectoral tariffs and not expand the sectors and increase the rates. So I think that this is far from over. And I think that, whatever deals people are striking right now, most of the deals will hinge completely on the Supreme Court ruling, which unfortunately will take a few months to be realized.
Jahangir, just wondering when there's going to be any truce between India and the US on tariffs, though. Of course, it's a diplomatic issue and one can't really second guess what's going to transpire. But here's only hoping that something like Japan transpires between India and US too.
Yeah, we can always hope for that, but the way in which India has reacted to it, as you politely called it diplomatic, isn't exactly the way in which I think the US expected India to react. So I think, again, along with everything else that is happening, all the other uncertainty, there is now clear uncertainty as to how the BRICS as a group are going to react to or respond to these tariff threats, and what will be the pace of negotiations. And it's not just India uncertainty about India dealing with the US, you have Brazil also in the same mode. So I think that, all that we can say at this point in time is that, look, the world is far more uncertain. There is very little certainty that any of these trade deals have brought to the global trade scene. And however much we might hate it, I think there will be a time sooner or later where we have to go back to the drawing board and redo all of these calculations again.
Right. Jahangir, just wanted to get your opinion on India because lots happening domestically as well, right?
Sure.
Quite impressive touching 8% GDP data. And then, of course, the GST bazooka. Does that really change the narrative? Because what we are grappling with is also a humongous amount of FI sell-off.
Right. So on the GDP data, I'm the last person who should ask that question. There is a serious methodological issue with the manner in which our quarterly GDP numbers are calculated. So less said about that, the better it is. Let me turn to the things that we can concretely talk about, which is the GST. Clearly, the GST move is significant in the sense that it simplifies to a large extent, the GST structure that had been the aim right from the beginning, that if you simplify the GST structure, you are going to end up eventually, not immediately, but eventually you are going to end up having a higher revenue than if you have a very complicated structure. And that was the basis on which, everybody talks about a single GST rate. Obviously, we are nowhere close to a single GST rate, and it's unlikely that we will come to a single GST rate at any time soon, but it is better than what we had. So clearly that's a very positive move. Now, in terms of the impact of the economy, the government has said that it's about 0.15% of GDP is the revenue impact. So that's the relief that is coming from the budget. We also know there is about the end of the GST says that should give you about 0.5% of GDP. So overall, the relief that is coming from that all of this provides us about 0.6% of GDP in terms of improved effective household income. That should translate into half a percentage point of consumption as level going up. Now, so whatever the consumption level was, it should go up by 0.5% of GDP. Now, if that 0.5% of GDP increase in consumption happens in one quarter, then you can have a massive increase in growth in that quarter. If it happens over a year's time, that's a 0.5 percentage point increase in the growth rate. After that, they all levels up. There is no more growth impulse coming from GST unless GST is cut again. But we are going to have a higher level of consumption and therefore a higher base for consumption. That's the positive stuff. But I think most of the positive stuff comes from, a better, if more efficient GST system, rather than looking for a permanent increase in the growth rate. There is no permanent increase in growth rate. The growth rate increase is only the amount of time it takes for consumption to move by that 0.5 percentage point, whether it's 1 quarter or 6 months or 1 year.
Well, indeed. From 4 slab rates, it's been cut to 2 now. And yes, the consumption remains the key theme for the GST. But Jahangir, so good having you on the channel today. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
All right.